because foreign prices on steel are increasing, U.S. prices of steel will increase because U.S. producers have no incentive to keep prices low. Cars and trucks, home appliances, machinery, airplanes, building materials that we use to build homes, and food and beverage cans. The steel industry saying that they welcome this increase in the tariff because they believe it will create more jobs. But Phil, for every one steel job saved, some reporting indicates from studies that 75 other manufacturing jobs are lost.
Car prices are soaring. Utility bills are climbing. Tens of thousands of people have lost their jobs. And factories are going silent, one by one. It all stems from what might sound like a familiar move: raising taxes to protect local manufacturers. America's new steel and aluminum tax policy is not just moving corporate money around. It's also shifting the rhythm of life for millions of workers and consumers. And the truth is, we're only at the beginning. On June 4th, 2025, the United States officially doubled its import taxes on steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. The goal was to shield local manufacturers from cheaper goods coming in from abroad. Canada and Mexico were not granted exemptions this time. Though the United Kingdom was left off the tariff list, we've seen something like this before. Back in 2018, a similar policy created about 1,000 jobs in the steel industry. But it also led to the loss of around 75,000 jobs in related manufacturing sectors. Now, car prices are expected to jump by anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 each, thanks to rising material costs. For the average American household, this could mean paying roughly $3,800 more per year, enough to cancel a family vacation or force cutbacks in everyday spending. Raising steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% has caused production costs to spike, especially for industries like auto manufacturing. According to the Washington Post, a car built in the U.S. could now cost anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 more than before, depending on the model and the maker. And it doesn't stop at cars. The impact is showing up across the whole economy. Yale's Budget Lab estimates that the 2025 tariffs are pushing consumer prices up by an average of 2.3%. That translates to about $3,800 more per year per household, the kind of money that could cover a month of rent or several months' worth of groceries. On a broader scale, the economy is slowing down. The real GDP has dropped by 0.9 percentage points, meaning the country could lose somewhere between $100 billion and $180 billion per year. That's due to a mix of higher costs for businesses and weaker consumer spending. People might not feel it all at once, but over time, they'll see grocery bills slowly tick upward. Maybe last week's shopping trip cost $150, and this week it's closer to $160, even if you bought the same items. And with car prices rising by the thousands, many families are holding off on buying new vehicles altogether. Even though the goal is to protect U.S. manufacturing, these higher taxes on steel and aluminum are now creating pressure in the opposite direction, especially for industries that depend heavily on metal, like auto, aviation, and food processing. As input costs go up, many businesses are being forced to scale back or hit pause on new investments. Estimates suggest as many as 146,000 jobs could be lost across metal-using industries, from factory floor workers to people working behind the scenes in supply chains. Experts say the root of the problem may not be foreign imports at all. Instead, it could lie in high energy costs and limited domestic production capacity. Tariffs might raise prices, but they don't fix the real challenges when it comes to global competition.
Because this is a president who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk too, and he's delivering on his promises to bolster our steel and aluminum industries in this country.
Imagine walking into your local supermarket. The case of beer that used to cost $15 now sells for $17. The car you plan to trade in this year suddenly comes with a price tag thousands of dollars higher. And somewhere, a factory worker is nervously wondering whether their shift will be cut. All of this traces back to one seemingly dry number: a 50% import tariff on aluminum. The question is, how much will that number reshape our everyday lives? On June 4th, the United States doubled its aluminum import tariff from 25% to 50%. The impact was immediate. The Midwest Premium, a key measure of aluminum prices, jumped from just 37 cents per pound in March to 62.5 cents by mid-June. Per ton. That's an increase from roughly $720 to more than $1,370, nearly doubling in just a few months. To put that into perspective, a typical car uses 250 to 400 kilograms of aluminum. With the new prices, the cost of each vehicle could rise by $1,200 to $1,800. The beverage industry, where each can of beer or soda requires around 15 grams of aluminum, could see costs rise by 5 to 7 cents per can. That means a 24-pack could climb by an extra $1 or $2. For a family of 4, the additional monthly expense from canned food and drinks alone could be $15 to $20, a significant burden when multiplied across the year. There is, however, one bright spot. Recycled aluminum is exempt from the 50% tariff. In the first quarter of this year, the U.S. imported 202,000 tons of aluminum scrap, a more than 30% increase from the same period last year. Recycling 1 million beer cans saves about 15 tons of primary aluminum. If this trend continues, the recycling sector could generate tens of thousands of new jobs, from scrap collection to factory operations. But it also sparks a scrap race with Europe. As more material flows into the U.S., higher demand may push scrap prices up by $50 to $70 per ton, with part of that cost eventually filtering back into household grocery bills. Companies are already sounding the alarm. Brewer Molson Coors expects its pre-tax profit this year to fall by 12 to 15%, equal to a loss of roughly $250 to $300 million. To offset the hit, the company may raise product prices by 5 to 10% or cut costs, including jobs. In the auto industry, if production costs rise by $1,500 per vehicle and a manufacturer sells 1 million cars annually, that's $1.5 billion in additional expenses. Consumers will shoulder part of it through higher prices, while the rest could trigger lower output, and with it, the loss of tens of thousands of jobs. Meanwhile, the Producer Price Index PPI for July surged to its highest level in 3 years. Experts warn that if the trend continues, consumer inflation could rise by another 1 to 1.5 percentage points by the end of the year. For everyday shoppers, that translates into a $200 grocery basket up $2 or $3. For ordinary households, these aren't just numbers on a chart. They're the feeling of a thinner wallet every time you walk out of the supermarket.
With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. It's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country.
Canada just made an unexpected move. No press conference, no big announcements, just a few changes in tariffs, quotas, and import-export figures. But behind that silence lies a clear message. America's closest neighbor is tightening the rules of the game, and Washington can't ignore it. At first glance, it all seems to be about milk, butter, and a few monthly shipments. But underneath, it touches a key part of the trade relationship between the two countries. One side says, 298% tariff. The other replies, we haven't even used up the quota. So who's right? Who loses out? And should everyday shoppers be concerned? Canada imposes very high tariffs, ranging from 241% to 298% on milk, cheese, and butter that go over their import quotas. This is part of a system called supply management, designed to protect domestic farmers. However, under the USMCA agreement, the U.S. is allowed to export a set amount of dairy into Canada without paying those high taxes. So far, that limit hasn't been reached. In fact, only about 27% of the duty-free quota has been used nowhere near the threshold for higher tariffs. This means most U.S. dairy entering Canada is either not taxed or only lightly taxed. The headline numbers 250% or 300% tariffs are the maximum rates, and they rarely apply. Also, keep in mind, dairy is a small slice of U.S.-Canada trade. Energy, autos, and industry carry far more weight. So even with those scary-sounding tariff rates, the price of U.S. milk hasn't seen big changes. If you're still paying around $4 for a carton of milk, you're likely to keep paying $4 next week too. There's no sudden jump to $6 or $7 on the horizon just because of this. The big tariff numbers: 245.5% for cheese, 298.5% for butter, and 241% for fluid milk only kick in when imports go over a set quota. According to the USMCA, the US can ship a specific amount of dairy to Canada tariff-free. As of now, only about 27% of that allowance has been used. In other words, most US dairy going to Canada is not facing those high rates. And even when you look at the big picture, all 14 quotas under the agreement only account for about 3.5% of Canada's dairy market. Yet, US dairy exports to Canada in 2024 still topped $1 billion. Proof that there's plenty of room to grow, according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Because of this, prices for imported dairy remain steady. If you're paying $4 for milk today, that price is holding since the products are coming in under that tax-free threshold. Dairy is just a small player in the overall trade game between the US and Canada. The real heavyweights are energy, automobiles, and industrial goods. Right now, US dairy exports only make up around 3.5% of the Canadian dairy market. Even though the value crossed the $1 billion mark in 2024, it's still a modest portion of the total trade between the two countries. Zooming out a bit, in 2024, the US imported $263 billion worth of agricultural and food products, while exporting only $191 billion. Around $91 billion of that trade was with Canada and Mexico, showing that the agricultural sector is facing a growing trade deficit. So while there may be some friction over dairy, the price tags for products like fresh milk, butter, or cheese on store shelves are not likely to swing wildly because dairy is still a minor piece of the puzzle. What could nudge food prices higher is the bigger picture of rising agricultural imports. For instance, a $10 bag of rice might go up to $11 fairly quickly, thanks to shifting exchange rates and import costs.
Yeah, this was a company that I think took a lot of people off guard when they announced earlier this year as much as a $5 billion hit to their bottom line as a result of tariffs. And it sort of, your initial reaction to that is, wait a second, this is an American company that builds a lot of cars in America.
Imagine walking into a car dealership. That SUV you were eyeing last month? It is now $6,000 more expensive. The salesperson gives you a look and sighs. It is the import taxes, not my fault. Then you glance at the car next to it, a Japanese one. Just as nice, but $5,000 cheaper. Sound familiar? You are not alone. Millions of Americans are in the same boat. What used to be a simple choice about buying a car has become a bigger story, one that touches on the economy, jobs, and the very idea of what a made-in-America car means anymore. While Ford and GM are losing billions, folks are falling behind on car payments. And imported cars are slowly taking over right here on American soil. In the second quarter of 2025, Ford posted a loss of $800 million and is now forecasting a full-year loss of up to $3 billion. GM has it even tougher, losing $1.1 billion this quarter alone, with annual losses expected to reach $5 billion. A big reason: the rising cost of imported parts, which now make up nearly half the cost of building a vehicle. Each car made in the US now costs between $5,000 and $10,000 more to produce. That price bump is making models like the Ford Bronco less attractive compared to imports like the Toyota 4Runner. Overall, new car prices have jumped by 15 to 20% compared to last year. That means an increase of $5,000 to $15,000 per vehicle. Just in April 2025 alone, prices went up 2.5%, twice the usual pace. Analysts predict that in 2025, we may see 2.5 to 3 million fewer vehicles sold due to sharp drops in demand. Auto loans are also becoming a concern. The percentage of subprime loans, those overdue by 60 days or more, has hit 6.56%, the highest since 1994. More and more Americans are turning to Japanese, Korean, or European cars brands like Toyota, Hyundai, and Subaru, which are keeping their prices more stable and supply more reliable. Since early 2025, the price of new vehicles in the US has jumped by 15 to 20%, compared to the same time last year, adding up to an extra $5,000 to $15,000 per car. A model that used to go for $30,000 can now easily cost $35,000 to $45,000. In April 2025 alone, prices rose 2.5%, a clear sign that price pressure is not going away. This sticker shock is keeping many buyers on the sidelines. Experts say we may see 2.5 to 3 million fewer cars on the market this year, simply because people are putting off their purchases. For many, just a $5,000 increase can push a monthly car payment from $500 up to nearly $600, enough to make some folks switch to used cars or hold off entirely. And when sales drop, it is not just the dealerships that feel it. Service centers and local jobs can be affected too. At the start of 2025, the percentage of subprime car loans that were more than 60 days overdue hit 6.56%, the highest it has been in over 30 years. People are struggling to keep up with payments, especially with stricter lending rules and higher car prices. For many households, taking out a car loan today means stretching beyond what they can comfortably afford. That is making the idea of owning a brand new American-made car feel out of reach. Meanwhile, Japanese, Korean, and European automakers brands like Toyota, Hyundai, and Subaru are growing their market share, thanks to better price control and smoother supply chains. They are quickly becoming the go-to choice for U.S. consumers who feel priced out of the domestic market. Going from a $450 monthly payment to $550 or even $600 is a big jump. It is not just about saving money anymore, it is about finding something that fits into a real family budget. And that often means looking beyond American brands